You're eating our food. Using our electricity. It's time you gave us half your pension, Bryce said. Noelle didn't even blink. She reached across the table and passed me the salad bowl, like we were still talking about the weather. I set my fork down, folded my napkin, carefully, quietly. It was the only thing I could control in that moment. The kitchen was still warm from the roasted chicken I'd made. I'd marinated it all morning while Noelle worked upstairs. I set the table, poured their drinks, lit a candle even though we never did that. I thought we were having dinner. I didn't know it was an ambush. I looked at Bryce, my son, my only child, and for a second, I searched his face for some sign that he didn't mean it, that maybe this was a misunderstanding. But all I saw was certainty, like this was something they'd discussed many times before. I beg your pardon, I asked, voice even. You're living here for free, Mom, he said a bit softer now. You've been here for 6 months, and things are tight. It's not fair for you not to contribute. I glanced at Noelle. She smiled. It was the kind of smile you give someone when you think you've finally cornered them politely. I cook. I clean. I fold your laundry. I've babysat twice this week. Noelle shrugged. We appreciate that, really. But at the end of the day, it's not financial. And this household runs on numbers. Household. Not home, not family. Household, Bryce added. It's not like we're asking for everything. Just half. Just half. I stood up slowly. My knee ached from surgery last year, but I didn't let it show. I collected my plate, walked it to the sink, and rinsed it under the water without a word. They thought I would argue. They thought I'd panic. I just went to my room, shut the door, and locked it. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was shocked, but because something inside me had quietly snapped. The next morning, Noelle knocked on my door with a mug of coffee in her hand and a practiced smile on her face. Can we talk? I opened the door, took the mug without a word, and sat on the edge of the bed. She didn't wait for an invitation, just stepped in and started speaking like we were equals in this conversation. We weren't trying to be harsh last night, she said. We've just been reviewing our budget and, well, it's just practical. Everyone contributes. Everyone I asked. She nodded. Yes, that's how families work now. We all do our part. And what's your part, Noelle? I asked, sipping the coffee. It was too sweet. She always added sugar without asking. Her smile tightened. Bryce and I handle the mortgage, utilities, the kids' school costs, insurance. It adds up. We just thought it made sense. You've been a guest for a while. I tilted my head. A guest. She didn't flinch. 6 months is a long time. We love having you here, but it's starting to affect our finances. I kept my voice calm. Do you or Bryce give half of your paychecks to this household? Noelle blinked. Well, no, but that's different. How? She didn't answer. Just looked at me like she was waiting for me to come around. Like this conversation would end with me apologizing for being a burden. I set the mug on the dresser. Thank you for the coffee. She took the hint and left without another word. Downstairs, I could hear her speaking softly to Bryce. I didn't need to catch the words. The tone was enough. Justification. Agreement. No hesitation. Later that night, Bryce came up and knocked once before opening the door halfway. We didn't mean to upset you. We just thought you'd understand. I looked at him, my son, and realized I didn't know who he was anymore. I do understand, I said. Perfectly. And that's when I decided I needed to find out what else they weren't saying. When Bryce was 9, I worked 2 jobs. Full-time at the public library and evenings shelving books at the university archive across town. I'd bring home leftover pastries from the faculty lounge, and he'd think they were a treat. I never told him they were the only dinner some nights. I skipped vacations. Skipped replacing the fridge when it hummed too loud. Skipped the winter coat I wanted when he needed cleats for soccer. And when he got pneumonia his sophomore year of college, and I couldn't afford the deductible, I sold my wedding band at a pawn shop 2 towns over. No questions asked, just a quiet goodbye to something that had already stopped being a comfort. I never once made him feel guilty. Never brought up the sacrifices. I just smiled when he graduated, clapped the loudest, and framed the diploma like it was mine too. Years later, when I fell on the porch and cracked my kneecap, he was the first one to call. "Move in with us for a while," he'd said. "It'll be easier. You won't have to worry about anything." So I downsized, packed up my life into boxes, sold the dining set Harold built, and rented out the condo I'd paid off after 30 years of careful budgeting. I kept the lease agreement in a folder labeled emergency only. The rent wasn't much, but it was enough. I never brought it up to Bryce or Noelle. I didn't think I had to. I thought they invited me into their home because they loved me, because I had done enough, given enough, been enough. But now I knew what they saw: a walking pension plan. A warm body who could cook clean, watch the kids, and fund their dreams. They thought I was trapped, dependent, passive. They had no idea I still had keys to a place of my own and income they'd never touched. That night, while they were watching TV downstairs, I pulled out that folder from my suitcase and flipped to the section labeled contingency. The walls in that house were thin. It was past midnight when I heard Noelle's voice float up through the floor vent, low and smug. "She's stubborn, but I think she'll cave soon," she said. A pause. Then laughter. "Once she signs over her pension access, we'll finally be able to redo the kitchen." Bryce already spoke to the mortgage guy. My body went still. Not because of the money, but because of the certainty in her tone. This wasn't speculation. This was a plan. A conversation they'd clearly rehearsed, maybe even mapped out. I slid out of bed and stood near the vent, careful not to make a sound. "She won't want to make things awkward," Noelle continued. "She's old school. Guilt will do half the work. Honestly, it's a smart move. Bryce said she sold her condo, but he thinks she might still have something tucked away. If she just gave us access, we could consolidate everything and get the remodel started by fall." The casualness of it stunned me. Not a single word about what I might want. Not even the pretense of care. I backed away slowly, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at the far wall. They didn't see me as family. They saw me as funding. Something to be leveraged, extracted, replaced when dry. All that talk about contributing, it wasn't about fairness. It was about ownership. They were waiting for me to break, to offer up my accounts like some kind of tithe for being allowed to stay. But I hadn't asked to stay forever. I hadn't taken anything from them. And now I knew without a shadow of doubt that I wasn't part of their family in their eyes. I was a means to an end. And if they had a plan, I needed one too. I opened my notebook, flipped to a clean page, and wrote one word at the top: exit. The next morning, I walked into the kitchen as if nothing had changed. Noelle was pouring cereal for the twins. Bryce was on his phone. I poured myself coffee and sat down. "I've been thinking," I said, "about what you mentioned the other night." Noelle turned quickly, too quickly. "Really, I don't know about handing over access to my pension," I said, stirring slowly, "but I suppose it wouldn't hurt to review the numbers. Maybe there's a way I can help more formally." Her smile spread fast. "That would mean a lot." I nodded and sipped the too sweet coffee. "Let me think it through over the weekend." "Of course," she said. "Take your time." She didn't ask what I needed. She didn't ask how I felt. She just went back to her morning like a woman who thought she'd won. That weekend, I barely left my room. I told them I was tired. My knee was acting up. I needed quiet. They didn't question it. I reviewed every account I had: pension savings, the rental income. I called my attorney and had her draft an addendum to the trust removing Bryce, entirely naming the Literacy Foundation as full beneficiary. Then I called my property manager. My condo's tenant had a month left on their lease, but she said they were preparing to relocate anyway. I offered to refund the deposit if they moved out within the week. Shouldn't be a problem, she said. They've already boxed half the place. I scheduled a moving company for the following Friday, gave them the address of this house and told them to be discreet. Then each night, after Bryce and Noelle went to bed, I packed, drawer by drawer, closet by closet. My clothes, my books, the framed photo of Harold and me from a Vermont orchard long before cancer changed everything. I didn't cry. Not once. Because this time, I was leaving on my terms. And when the last box was sealed, I slipped the contract from the lawyer into a manila envelope and wrote their names on the front. I waited until Tuesday morning. Noelle had her Pilates class, and Bryce left early for a meeting. The house was quiet, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the chirp of the coffee machine finishing its cycle. The movers arrived right on time. Two men, polite and efficient, carried my boxes down the back steps and into the waiting truck without a word of surprise. I had labeled everything. Nothing in the main living areas. Just the contents of my room, my private things, the parts of me they never asked about. Before I left, I walked back into the kitchen one last time. I had already wiped down the counters, closed every cabinet. The light was soft through the window above the sink. I opened my purse and took out the manila envelope I'd prepared the night before. I placed it dead center on the kitchen island. Inside it, a copy of my newly updated trust, signed and notarized, my attorney's business card tucked neatly behind the document, and one handwritten note on plain stationery. If family means money, I suggest you find an investor. No anger, no accusations. Just the truth. I stepped out of the house and locked the door behind me. The click echoed a little louder than I expected. I didn't look back. The drive to my condo took less than 20 minutes. The tenant had cleared out the night before. The air smelled faintly of lemon oil and fresh paint. My name was still on the mailbox. The key still fit. I walked inside, dropped my purse on the entryway table, and stood there for a full minute, breathing in the silence. No one called that morning. No one texted. They didn't even know I was gone yet. But when they did, when they came home and saw that envelope, I hoped they read every word. Not just the ink, but the years behind it. And I hoped they finally understood what they'd lost. Noelle texted first. Just 3 words. You really left. An hour later, Bryce called. I let it ring, then another text. We should talk. Then nothing. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The condo felt smaller than I remembered, but warmer. I spent the first afternoon opening windows, letting fresh air chase out the months of stillness. I called a painter and asked for soft green in the bedroom, something restful. Something that didn't ask for permission. The next day, Lana came by with a tray of muffins and a smile that didn't ask questions. We sat in my little kitchen and drank strong coffee out of chipped mugs that had survived 3 decades. She talked about her new garden. I listened. I didn't tell her everything, just enough. I'm glad you're home, she said before leaving. You look like yourself again. Later that week, I stopped by the grocery store for dish soap and carrots. In the produce section, I heard a familiar voice before I saw the face. Noelle's mother. She was holding a bag of lemons, speaking to someone beside her, but when she caught sight of me, she smiled like we were old friends. Well, well, she said loud enough for the nearby clerk to turn. I heard you moved out. Must have been nice living rent-free for that long. I didn't blink. I didn't flinch. I just smiled. Not the polite kind. The kind that says you don't know the half of it and you never will. She waited for a reaction, but I didn't offer one. Just turned, took my basket, and walked toward checkout. Back home, I put the groceries away and sat on the couch. The silence was real. Not forced. Not heavy. It belonged to me. Later that evening, I opened the trust file again, reviewed the documents, and slipped them into the fireproof box beneath my bed. Noelle could text 100 more times. Bryce could knock on every door in the building. But nothing was going back to the way it was. It was a quiet Thursday morning when the phone rang. I recognized the number instantly. Ms. Marin, my attorney, said just wanted to confirm the updated trust has been fully executed. All the documents are filed and copies are in your secure folder. And the previous beneficiaries I asked, though, I already knew the answer. Removed, she said without hesitation. Your son is no longer listed. The Literacy Foundation is now the sole recipient. I closed my eyes and let the silence stretch for a beat. I want to be clear, I said. If something happens to me, anything, every cent, every account, the condo, all of it, goes to the foundation. Not a portion, not a scholarship in my name. All of it. Understood, she said. That's now locked in. I thanked her, hung up and set the phone down on the windowsill. Outside, the mail carrier walked by. 2 kids raced past on scooters, their laughter trailing behind them. I thought about the children who'd benefit from that money someday, kids who'd never met me, but who might one day read their first book in a small town library, just like Bryce had. That was enough for me. He'd been a curious child, always asking questions, always wanting more stories. I used to think that meant he would grow up to value knowledge, to understand what it meant to be shaped by words. But somewhere along the way, he stopped reading. And I stopped being someone he listened to. That hurt more than the pension. I made a pot of coffee and pulled out a worn copy of The House on Mango Street. My old copy, dog-eared, annotated, full of memories. I read for an hour uninterrupted. Later that afternoon, I took the trust confirmation, slipped it into the same fireproof box as my other documents, and sealed it shut. The past was officially behind me now. The future no longer belonged to those who tried to cut me out. And yet somehow, I knew they still weren't done. I saw him from the upstairs window before he even made it to the door. Bryce stood at the front entrance of my condo building, shifting from foot to foot, holding a letter in his hand, like it weighed more than it should. He looked older, or maybe just tired. He stared up at the second floor once, but not long enough to see the edge of the curtain move. I didn't go down. He stood there for maybe 5 minutes. Then, without ringing the bell, without trying to call, he walked over to the mailbox and slid the envelope inside. And then he left. I waited until he'd turned the corner before I went to get it. The letter was handwritten. Not messy, not rushed, but practiced. Like he'd rewritten it a few times before settling on this version. Mom. We were stressed. Noelle was trying to plan ahead. Maybe we were too harsh. I never meant for things to get so cold between us. We just thought it would help to share the load. I hope you're well, Bryce. No apology. No acknowledgement of what they'd said. What they'd planned. Just a soft regret, like someone who bumped into you in a grocery aisle and never looked up. I folded the paper once, then again, and slid it into the kitchen drawer beside the warranty manuals and leftover birthday candles. Out of sight. I didn't reply. He'd lost access not just to my accounts or my home, but to my trust. To the space in my life where I once assumed he'd always belong. People like Noelle don't plan for reconciliation. They plan for returns. And Bryce had learned that language too well. He didn't come back after that. But I had the feeling I'd hear from them again, not because they missed me, but because they missed the benefits. And when they did, I would be ready. The check goes out every month without fail to the after-school reading program at the elementary school, where I used to shelve books and tie shoelaces and listen to shy second graders sound out new words. It's not a fortune, but it's steady. They send thank you notes, hand-drawn and smudged with markers. I keep every one of them. My living room has become a quiet sanctuary. The coffee table holds a rotating stack of paperbacks and a vase that I fill each week from the florist down the street. Fresh flowers, always. Sometimes daffodils, sometimes tulips, once wild sunflowers that took over the whole corner, like joy spilling sideways. The library I once called home invited me to speak at their annual fundraiser. I stood in front of a room full of donors and school board members, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. I told them about the power of a well-timed book, of how it can change a child's course. I didn't talk about Bryce. I didn't need to. Mail still comes with his name on the return address, sometimes handwritten, sometimes typed. I don't open them anymore. Not out of anger, but because I already know what's inside. Explanations, excuses, maybe apologies wrapped in passive words that never name the damage. They sit in a small basket by the door. Unread. Unwanted. I didn't raise a son to owe me money. I raised a man. He became someone else. That loss is real. I carry it like a scar under my coat, unseen but there. But I also carry something else, peace. Not the kind that comes after forgiveness, but the kind that comes after you finally stop begging to be seen. I pour my coffee each morning without wondering what they'll need from me next. I buy books without checking anyone's account. I choose silence when it serves me. And in this version of my life, everything I give is truly mine to give. And that finally is enough.